The alien princess waited 30 days, then she undressed without warning. The sky on Gleesix was a strange purple, filled with twin moons and floating crystals that shimmered in the old wind. Mason Price, a human engineer, stood outside the alien outpost, looking at the tall gates. He had been sent here from Earth to help repair damaged power lines and teach advanced mechanics to the alien colony. The locals called the Threxeri were tall, strong, and serious, with sharp eyes and strange customs. Mason was one of the few humans allowed here. He was told this mission was peaceful, educational, and safe. No one told him about the pact. Human. A voice said behind him, calm but firm. He turned to see her, Jirani, a warrior of the Threxeri, standing tall in her armor, her long silver hair moving in the wind. "You are late," she added. Her golden eyes locked onto his face. "Sorry," Mason smiled. "The terrain here is hard to walk through." She didn't smile back. "The elders have assigned us to work together," she said. "You will stay in my quarters." Mason raised an eyebrow. "Wait, live with you?" "It is the way," she said simply, then turned and walked ahead, not waiting for his reply. He followed, pulling his heavy tool bag over his shoulder, confused but curious. Inside the outpost, the walls were made of smooth black stone, glowing slightly with blue lines. Threxeri tech, Mason thought, advanced and ancient at the same time. Her room was large, warm, and clean, with 2 sleeping pads, a central fire pit, and shelves lined with weapons and books. "You sleep there," she pointed to the left side. "I sleep here," she said, pointing to the right. "Got it," Mason nodded, still unsure why they had to share a room. That night, Mason lay awake, hearing the soft breathing of Jirani on the other side of the room. He thought about the mission, the work, the strange silence between them. He had worked with aliens before, but none as cold and mysterious as her. In the morning, they worked together repairing energy conduits outside the dome. Jirani moved like a dancer, strong, graceful, and fast. She rarely spoke, but always watched him. Sometimes, he caught her looking when she thought he wasn't paying attention. 2 weeks passed like this. One evening, a sandstorm hit the area while they were outside checking solar panels. They had to take cover in a cave nearby. Inside, it was dark and dry, with walls covered in glowing markings. Jirani lit a torch and sat by the fire, her face serious. "This place is sacred," she said. "It is where Threxeri choose their mates." Mason blinked. "Wait, what?" She turned to him, her voice calm but steady. "You saved my life when the power conduit exploded," she said. "You pushed me away, and your arm was burned." "It was nothing," Mason shrugged. "Just instinct. To us, it means everything." Jirani replied, "When one saves another in danger, a pact is formed." Mason sat up straighter. "A pact?" "Yes," she said. "By our law, you and I are now bonded." He laughed nervously, like teammates. She tilted her head, confused. "No, bonded, as in lifetime mates." Mason stared at her, his heart pounding. Wait, are you saying we're married?" She nodded. "Yes." Silence filled the cave. Mason stood up, pacing. "I didn't agree to this. No one told me. It was written in the ancient codes," Jirani said calmly. "It is a great honor." Mason turned away, his mind racing. He had come here to fix wires, not to be part of some alien marriage ritual. I didn't mean to." He tried to explain, but she stood up and walked toward him. "You have honored the pact with your actions," she said softly, "but your heart holds confusion." Mason met her eyes, glowing gold in the torchlight. He didn't know what to say. Jirani walked back to her side of the cave, sat down, and whispered, "Perhaps tomorrow you will understand." Mason lay down far from the fire, staring at the glowing ceiling. This wasn't just a work trip anymore. He was part of something ancient, something deep, something dangerous, and Jirani, she expected more, much more. Jirani sat quietly in the corner of their shared room, sharpening a blade that hummed with faint blue light. Mason, across the room, was trying to fix a power relay from one of the mining bots. The silence between them had stretched for days. They spoke only when needed, work-related words, short and simple. But something strange hung in the air, like a question neither of them wanted to ask. Every night, Jirani changed into a soft black robe and sat at the edge of her bed, waiting. Every night, Mason would say good night and roll into his sleeping bag on the floor. He thought she just had a routine. He didn't know she was waiting for something else. Undressed. When two people survive a life-threatening event together, especially when they save each other, it is seen as fate. It creates what the Threxeri call a soul bind. And when a soul bind happens, the two must seal it through a ritual, a joining of bodies. To Jirani, it was sacred. To Mason, it was just teamwork. One morning, Jirani looked at Mason with narrowed eyes. She stood in front of him as he sipped recycled coffee, confused and sleepy. "It has been over a month," she said slowly, as if trying to speak in his human rhythm. "And you have not deflowered me." Mason choked on the coffee. He coughed hard and looked up at her, his face turning red. What did you just say?" he asked, almost laughing. Her expression didn't change. "You saved my life. I saved yours. We are bound," she said, calm but serious. "The joining must happen." He blinked at her. "You're talking about that, you mean, sleeping together?" He stood up now, waving his hands. "Jirani, we're just co-workers, teammates, friends, maybe." Jirani's voice turned sharp. "You insult me," she said, her eyes glowing faintly. "Is my form not pleasing to your species?" "No. I mean, yes. I mean you're beautiful. That's not the problem." He stammered, then stopped, rubbing his forehead. "You're misunderstanding something. Humans don't just do that because of rules or rituals. But we are already mated by Threxeri code," she said, stepping closer. "It is not a choice. It is the path written in fire and survival." Mason stepped back. "Look, I respect your culture, but I didn't agree to anything. Nobody told me about this soulbind stuff." Jirani stood in silence for a long time. Then she turned and walked away from him, her back straight and proud, but her fists were clenched. That night, she didn't sit on her bed. She stayed in armor and stared at the wall. The next day, the outpost was visited by an alien elder, an old Threxeri male with deep scars and a golden staff. He asked Mason to step outside. The two spoke in hushed tones near the edge of the glowing cliffs. "You do not honor the bond," the elder said, his voice calm but cold. "I never agreed to a bond," Mason replied, frustrated. The elder nodded slowly. "Then you insult the blood right," he said, "and risk war between your kind and ours." Mason stared at him in disbelief. "Over a misunderstanding, over honor," the elder said simply. Later that night, Mason sat alone, thinking hard. Jirani didn't speak to him. She didn't even look at him. But before the lights dimmed, she whispered a single sentence, barely loud enough to hear. "I did not ask for this either," she said. Mason looked at her from across the room. In her silence, he saw something different. Not a warrior, not a strange alien, but someone trapped, like him, in something too big and too old to fight. For the first time since landing on Undressed, Mason didn't feel like an outsider. He felt like a prisoner, and tomorrow, the real pressure would begin. Mason couldn't sleep, not after what the elder said. Every time he closed his eyes, the words echoed in his head. "You insult the blood right. You risk war." It sounded ridiculous, but here, on this frozen alien moon, tradition held more power than logic. The next morning, Jirani was gone. Her bed was empty, her weapons gone, her armor too. For the first time in weeks, she left without him. Mason felt the cold air in the room like a warning. Something had changed. He followed her footprints through the snow-covered path leading toward the hills beyond the outpost. No one else dared follow. The soldiers gave him strange looks, but said nothing. At the edge of the hills stood a narrow stone opening hidden behind glowing vines and black thorns. A small cave. Mason stepped inside. The inside of the cave was dim, lit only by soft pulses from crystals in the walls. Old carvings, strange symbols, and images of warrior pairs were etched into the stone. One image showed a Threxeri male placing his hand on a female's chest. Another showed the female pulling him into the fire circle. Jirani stood at the far end of the cave, her back to him. She had removed her armor, now wearing a robe of silver and black. Her long hair flowed freely down her back. She didn't turn to look at him. "You came," she said, her voice calm, but low. I had to, Mason replied, stepping slowly toward her. You just disappeared. This is the place of binding, she said, turning finally to face him. You must see it. You must understand what your presence means. He looked around. The air felt thick with memory, as if ghosts of past bonds still lived in the shadows. I don't want to hurt you, Jirani, he said softly. I didn't come here to shame you, but I'm human. I don't understand this whole ritual. Jirani stepped forward. Her eyes were softer now, not angry, just tired. Do you think I understand your ways? She asked. You speak of choice, but I was raised to follow tradition. I fight, I protect, I bind with one who proves worthy. And you think I'm worthy because I saved you? He asked. No, she said. I think you're worthy because you didn't take advantage when you could. You protected me without expecting anything. Mason paused. That hit deeper than he expected. Jirani touched the crystal wall behind her. A hum vibrated through the floor. The wall lit up, revealing a doorway deeper into the cave. You must see the fire well, she said. He followed her into a large circular chamber. At the center was a low pit filled with blue flames. The air was warm here. Symbols circled the pit, each one glowing faintly. This is where the rite is sealed, Jirani said. But we will not use it, not unless you choose freely. Mason looked at her in surprise. I thought you said it wasn't a choice. I thought that too, she whispered. Until I met you. Silence wrapped around them like a soft blanket. Mason sat near the edge of the fire. So what happens if we don't seal it? Jirani sat beside him, not touching, just close. They will call me dishonored. Say I was not worthy to be chosen. They may cast me out. Mason clenched his fists. That's not fair, no. It is not, she said, with a small, bitter smile. But life is not always fair. He looked at her, really looked, not as an alien, not as a warrior, but as someone stuck between two worlds, just like him. And in that moment, he knew something was changing. Maybe this wasn't about rules anymore. Maybe it was about what they would choose together. But outside the cave, in the falling snow, two shadowy figures watched them silently. And those watchers did not care about choice. They only cared that the ritual must be completed. The sky over the fortress was painted with stormlight. Jagged clouds split open by electric winds. Below, the ancient stone walls groaned under the pressure of the coming storm. Inside the mountain stronghold, Mason stood in chains, not because he was a criminal, but because he had refused the queen's demand once again. He didn't resist when the guards came. He knew fighting would only make things worse for Jirani. Not for himself. She wasn't with him now. They had been separated after leaving the fire cave. Two royal soldiers waited outside the entrance, and when she stepped out alone, they called it proof of his dishonor. The high chamber was cold, lined with watchers and priests, all wearing robes so long they dragged across the floor like shadows. The queen sat on her throne, her skin glowing silver under the light of the storm. You were given a sacred right, she said coldly, and you spat upon it. Mason didn't speak. He knew they wanted emotion, fear, apology. He gave them none. The queen leaned forward. Do you deny that you've bonded with my daughter in spirit, even if not in body? Mason raised his head slowly. I didn't come here for bonding. I came to keep peace between our people. Then why did she choose you? The queen asked, her voice like a blade. I didn't ask her to. He replied, maybe she saw something in me that you don't. Gasps rose from the watchers. The queen's fingers twitched. A quiet command, and the guards stepped forward, pulling Mason toward the ritual floor. You will face the trial of the flame, she said. If you pass, you may go free. If you fail, your death will seal your answer. He didn't fight them as they dragged him down the marble stairs. His eyes scanned the crowd, searching for Jirani. She wasn't there. Instead, an old priest approached with a mask of carved bone and a blade of fire glass. He sliced the air and opened the trial chamber gates, revealing a circular room of sand and smoke. Inside was a single opponent, massive and armored in ceremonial bronze, holding a curved staff twice Mason's size. The helmet hid its face, but the growl it let out wasn't human. This isn't a fair fight, Mason said calmly as the guards shoved him forward. The priest nodded. It is not supposed to be. The Gate shut behind him, the floor shifted, and the trial began. The opponent struck first. Fast and brutal, the staff cutting through the air like lightning. Mason barely dodged, falling into a roll, grabbing a broken rod from the sand. He'd fought in worse places on Earth, in orbit, during the Void Siege, but this wasn't about tactics or war. This was about survival. And Girani's honor. He didn't need to win. He just needed to survive long enough to force a choice. As the fight dragged on, Mason's strength began to fade, bruises forming under his skin, cuts on his arms, but he stood tall every time, refusing to fall. Then, from above, a voice rang out sharp and unexpected. "Stop the trial." Everyone turned. At the top of the stone stairs, Girani stood, not in armor, not in robes, but in her flame dancer form, barefoot, marked with the ancient red paints of truth, and glowing with the fire of her ancestors. The queen rose from her throne. "You dare interrupt the right of judgment?" "I do," Girani said, walking down the stairs slowly, "because I claim the human, fully and freely." By the old law, silence fell. The trial circle froze. Even Mason stopped breathing for a second. The queen's face darkened. "You know what that means." "I do," she said, her voice steady. "If he accepts, the right is sealed by consent. No trial, no ritual, no blood." All eyes turned to Mason, still breathing hard, still standing. Girani reached the edge of the circle, held out her hand, her eyes burning with hope and fear together. "This time, the choice is yours," she said softly. "Not mine, not theirs, just yours." Mason stepped forward slowly, every bone in his body aching, but his heart clear. He took her hand. The circle lit up with light, ancient symbols flaring under their feet, and in that moment, no one could speak, no one dared, because something impossible had just happened. A human had claimed a warrior princess, not through blood or ritual, but through choice. And somewhere deep within the fortress, far beneath the stone, something ancient stirred again, as if awakened. By love or by danger, because this bond would not bring peace, it would bring war. The stars above the fortress blinked in and out like they were holding their breath. The bond was sealed, but the silence that followed felt like the calm before a storm. Mason and Girani stood in the sacred circle, their hands still joined, the ancient light still pulsing beneath their feet. But the queen said nothing. She didn't need to. Her eyes said everything. She had lost, but when she finally spoke, her voice was not angry. It was calm, colder than before. "Leave," she said. "Both of you." Girani narrowed her eyes. "You will exile me?" The queen gave a small nod. "You broke with tradition. You did not follow the flame path. There is no place left for you inside these walls." Mason stepped forward. "So be it," he said. "We'll leave and survive on our own terms." They turned without waiting for her blessing. The guards didn't move to stop them. No one dared. Not after what they had seen, how the flame answered the bond, how the human stood through every trial. But as the massive doors opened and cold wind poured in from the night, a strange buzzing sound echoed through the sky. Girani stopped, her eyes wide. Mason turned. "What is that?" A crimson streak broke through the clouds, followed by another, then another. The watchers on the walls shouted. Horns blew across the fortress. "They're here." Girani whispered, the Voidborn. Mason didn't understand, but he didn't need to. The way Girani grabbed his hand and pulled him back inside said everything. The queen was already shouting orders. Shields up, warriors to the walls, her throne forgotten, her crown falling from her head as she ran toward the war room. Mason and Girani followed her down a spiral path that led into the command chamber, a circular space, surrounded by glowing maps and pulsing lights. Above them, the sky rippled with fire, enemy dropships piercing the clouds like teeth. Girani turned to Mason. "This is no coincidence. They knew the bond would happen today." He frowned. "You think someone told them?" She looked away, silent for too long, and that's when Mason knew. "There's a traitor," he said. She nodded. "In the queen's circle, maybe even one of the priest lords." Before they could speak again, a young scout rushed in, breathless. "They've breached the outer gate, and they're not just here for war." The queen turned sharply. "Then why?" The scout hesitated, then looked at Girani. "They sent a message," he said slowly. "They want the bonded pair handed over, or they'll burn the fortress to ash." Mason's heart pounded. The whole room froze. The queen looked at them. Both, her voice grim. "You broke my law, but you are still my blood." She looked at Jirani. "I will not hand you over." Mason stepped forward. "Then we fight." "No," the queen said, her voice stronger now. "You are not trained for this battle, but there may be another way." She turned toward the lower halls. The vaults still sleep beneath the stone, old weapons sealed long ago. Jirani's face changed. "Those weapons are cursed, or blessed," the queen answered. "Depends on who uses them." Mason looked between them. "Show me where." "They are." The queen hesitated, then pointed toward the black gate at the end of the room. "Follow the fire lines, and don't touch anything unless it speaks to you." As they left, the queen's voice followed. Softer now, but certain. "You wanted to be free, human. Now your freedom will be tested in flame." The black gate opened on its own, ancient gears. Groaning, Mason and Jirani stepped inside, the heat rising with each step, but Mason wasn't afraid. Not anymore. He had chosen her, and now the world would see what a human's choice could really do. Because war had come, and this time, he wasn't walking away from it. The vault whispered to them as they entered, a voice without words, old and deep. It wasn't sound they heard, it was feeling, like pressure in the chest and echoes in the bones. The stone walls glowed faintly with red and blue veins of light, breathing like a heartbeat trapped in rock. Jirani walked ahead, her steps sure but slow. Mason followed close, every muscle tense. The deeper they went, the heavier the air became. Like the past was pressing down on the present. "Where are we going?" Mason asked. Jirani didn't answer at first. Her hand brushed along the wall as if reading it. Then she said, "To the core chamber, where the old weapons were locked away after the fire wars." He looked around, confused. "And these weapons, will they work for me?" "They might," she said, "but they might also kill you." Mason gave a bitter laugh. "Great odds." They reached a large door, no handle, no keyhole. Just a circle in the center with strange alien markings glowing. Dimly, Jirani placed her palm on it, and the markings pulsed, then shifted, forming a symbol he didn't recognize. The door hissed open, revealing a round chamber with a high ceiling and no sound except the soft hum of machines. Sleeping in the dark, at the center of the room was a platform, and on it something covered by black cloth. Tall, sharp, almost like a coffin standing upright. Jirani spoke quietly. "That's it." The echo frame. Mason approached slowly. The air around it felt charged, like static before a storm. He reached out and touched the cloth. It dissolved at his touch. Underneath was a suit, not armor like before, but something sleeker, older, forged from silver black, alloy that shimmered with pulses of green and gold. The chest was marked with a single glowing handprint. Jirani whispered, "It will only bond with one who is both chosen and willing." Without waiting, Mason placed his hand over the print. The suit opened with a hiss and engulfed him in a rush of cold light. For a second, everything disappeared: his sight, his sound, his thoughts. Then came a flood of images, too fast to understand, symbols, stars, battles, screams, and a voice that spoke not in words, but in meaning. "You have chosen, now be forged." When the light faded, Mason stood tall, the echo frame clinging to him like second skin. Lines of fire danced beneath its surface. His eyes glowed faintly gold, and the floor beneath him cracked with every step. Jirani looked at him, not like a lover now, but like a warrior staring at something impossible. "You're not just bonded," she whispered. "You're activated." Mason turned, the suit responding instantly, moving with his thoughts like it was alive. He could feel everything: the weight of the fortress above them, the battle beginning at the gates, the panic in the walls, even the fire in Jirani's blood. It was like he had become part of the planet itself. Suddenly, the stone around them shuddered. An explosion far above. The Void-born had breached the final gate. Mason didn't wait. "Come on," he said, his voice deeper, steadier, the suit amplifying every word like thunder. They ran back through the vault, and the black gate sealed behind them on its own. When they reached the upper halls, the fortress was in chaos. Warriors clashed with Void-born invaders in the smoke-filled corridors. The enemy looked like twisted shadows with armor made of bone and fire. They tore through stone with claws and shrieked in alien tongues. Jirani leapt into the fight without hesitation, her blade a blur of silver in the dark. Mason followed, and the moment he joined the fight, everything changed. The echo frame flared with raw power, and his fists cracked the invader's armor like glass. His speed blurred him into a ghost, and every hit sent shockwaves that knocked back entire squads. He wasn't fighting like a man anymore, he was fighting like something made for war. The fortress defenders began to rally, shouts rising as they saw the human moving like a living weapon. "They've brought a war beast." One of the invaders cried before Mason broke through him like thunder breaking a mountain. Jirani fought beside him, breathless and fierce, her movements sharper, her strikes cleaner. It was as if his presence had ignited something deeper in her too. Together, they pushed toward the upper tower where the queen had made her final stand. But when they reached it, the doors were already broken, and the chamber inside was filled with blood. The queen lay on the floor, still breathing, but barely, her crown shattered beside her. Around her stood 5 void-born generals, tall, monstrous, and covered in bone armor lined with red crystal. One of them turned and hissed, "You are too late." But Mason didn't stop. He moved like a storm, and this time, even the generals looked unsure, because something inside the echo frame had just awakened fully, not just the weapon, but the purpose. The throne room was silent, broken only by the hum of the cracked energy pillars. The walls had been scorched black from the last blast. The Empress lay on the floor, eyes half closed, breath shallow, her robes torn, but her voice still sharp. "As ever, you don't understand what you've done," she whispered. Mason stood just steps away, the echo frame glowing like fire along his spine. He wasn't breathing hard. He wasn't even sweating. The suit had bonded fully, and something beyond human pulsed inside him now. "I understand perfectly," Mason said, his voice calm. "You used tradition to control a people who stopped believing in themselves. You think this was about control?" She snapped. "It was about survival. Without the ritual, without the bonding, we lose the connection to the core, the only thing keeping this planet stable." Jirani stepped beside him, blood dripping down her shoulder from the last fight, but her eyes burned with clarity. "He is the core now," she said. "It bonded to him by choice, not force, the way it was always meant to." The Empress tried to rise but failed. She looked at Mason with something between fear and awe. "There were others before you," she said. "They burned out, their minds broke. What makes you think you're different?" Mason looked down at his hands, watched the golden lines swirl like rivers beneath the skin of the echo frame. He had wondered that too, but not anymore, "Because I'm not carrying this alone," he said, and turned to Jirani. She reached for him, and the moment their hands touched, the light spread, not just between them, but across the chamber, across the city, across the sky, from the shattered balcony. The stars blinked brighter, and then the clouds parted above the capital, revealing something vast rising in the distance. A structure buried deep beneath the planet's crust, now pushing upward like a mountain being born. The watchtower, a living relic from the first flame, wore its engines pulsed with the same golden light that ran through Mason's body. Jirani's voice trembled. "It's responding to you." "No," Mason said. "It's responding to us." In the streets below, the people stopped fighting, stopped running, looked up as the watchtower bloomed into the sky, petals of metal, unfolding like a massive flower. For the first time in centuries, the system felt alive again. And the Void-born? They paused too, then screamed, not in anger, but in fear. One of the captured priests had once whispered that the Void-born feared only one thing, not a weapon, not a species, but a flame that could think, move, and choose. That flame now stood in the ruined throne room, and it had chosen. Mason turned back to the Empress. "This is the end of your rule." She nodded once, exhausted, her voice thin. "Then burn it better than I did." Mason and Jirani stepped onto the edge of the balcony, and the watchtower sent a beam of light across the sky, reaching distant satellites, old ships, hidden bases, reactivating forgotten systems. A signal went out, to Earth, to allies long separated by fear, to enemies who once believed humanity was weak. The message was clear. A human had come to the heart of an empire, had refused to take what was offered, had been chosen instead, and now stood, not as a conqueror or a consort, but as something new, a bridge between stars, a flame that would never fade. Final line for your voiceover. They gave him a throne. He gave them a future, and all it cost was one honest bond.